And we'll start. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sifting Through the Rubble. Sifting through the rubble is meant for parents, grandparents, friends, family, anybody who's interested in learning how to recover what is classical Lutheran education. We here at Memorial Lutheran School focus heavily on our mission statement, that is to build a strong foundation. And when I was thinking through what can I call this that would be slightly catchy and not nearly as long-winded, when we're talking about foundations, our children, although they definitely don't have blank slates when they come to our school, regardless of the age they come, they do have less rubble to clear in order to start building the foundation. But we parents and family members and friends, when we approach a classical education, we have rubble that we need to clear. It's not a blank slate, certainly. We've all been taught a certain way. We've expected education to be a certain way. And when we approach this seemingly newfangled thing called classical education, we have rubble. We have debris all over where we're trying to build our foundation. So the hope of these little half hours, most weeks, is to help clear away the rubble and assist in building a strong foundation for us as adults while our children are cared for here at school. The approach for the first 8 or so of these will be to go through what we've adopted as principles of pedagogy. And I'm going to use a whiteboard in and out of here, as well as share different things. It's hard not to have a board. So let's talk about pedagogy. Pedagogy, it comes from 2 words. It comes from the word for child in Greek, pais, paidos. That's where you get then you got to take it into Latin to get the peda, like pediatrician, and pedagogy. And then the gogy part of pedagogue or pedagogy or pedagogy is from the Greek verb ago, which means to lead. The Latin verb is similar too. So pedagogy is how you lead children. And the reason why we have this word is because in the ancient world, there were family household slaves whose job was to take the boy from the house or the villa to the school. He was the child leader, the pedagogue. St. Paul talks about this in Galatians. He uses this image as the law as pedagogue. And the pedagogue's job was to get the boy from home to school, but he was to do so in whatever means possible. So this sometimes included whacking him upside the head to make sure he didn't go the other way, telling him what to do. All right, so pedagogue as an ancient word didn't have very nice connotation to it. But now pedagogy really just means the way in which you teach. It doesn't, although sometimes it could be smacking a kid upside the head, but we can't do that because that's not in our discipline policy. So pedagogy is how we teach children. My goal then is to explain our pedagogy. What is a classical pedagogy? So we're going to start by looking at the principles. And then every week we'll pick one of these and go into what does it mean as a principle, and then how do we do it? How do we pay attention to it? What does it mean for education? What does it mean for living? Why is it important? So as a school, Memorial Lutheran School stands by these principles. There are 9 of them. The first is Festina Lente, make haste slowly. And that will be our topic for today after we briefly review the other ones, not keeping with Festina Lente. But Festina Lente, make haste slowly, will be our first assignment, so to speak. Then you've got multum non multa, much not many. Decendo discimus, by teaching we learn. Repetitio mater memoriae, repetition is the mother of memory. Optimus magister bonus liber, the best teacher is a good book. And then we have skole, which is contemplation and restful learning. Ecstasis and studium, wonder and curiosity. Embodied learning, which is a mixture of using the body and songs, chants, and jingles. And then virtues in education, cultivating love, humility, diligence, and constancy. This list of principles comes from Dr. Christopher Perrin, at least in its original form. Dr. Christopher Perrin is in charge of, well, you're not in charge, but he's one of the leading minds behind Classical Academic Press. We use their Latin curriculum for first and second grade. That's the Song School Latin. And we've adopted their writing curriculum, writing and rhetoric, for third on up. We also use them in our logic program. But Dr. Perrin's got great videos. You can find those on YouTube if you want more. He's also really easy to listen to. He also has a podcast called Cafe Skole that you can find on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm a Spotify user. But Christopher Perrin, Perrin, is worthwhile. He's got a lot to say on classical education and a lot of great things to say. So these are the pedagogical principles we've adopted at Memorial, and I want to start by talking about Festina Lente, make haste slowly. Now, Festina Lente, let's see. Can anybody give me a thumbs up if you see a tortoise and a hare? Do you see a tortoise and a hare? Good. Okay, so Festina Lente, make haste slowly. This is not American at all. Americans are bad at making haste slowly. We are very good at making haste hastily. We are good at rush, 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 rush. I'm from New York, so I've got a degree in rushing, right? It's sort of how things go. You go from one thing to the next, from one thing to the next. And it's very, very difficult to get out of that habit when you're already in it. It's very hard to say, you know what, I'm not going to rush. Because you have to be on time for the podcast webinar. You've got to be on time for work. You've got to get the kids to school on time. You don't want to be tardy. And so this tension between being diligent and doing what's needed and rushing from one thing to the next because of either lack of preparation or the chances and changes of life, this tension is very difficult to live in. And we as adults tend to embody making haste hastily. So it's important as we approach education and life in general to embrace making haste slowly, that is deliberately, that is paying attention to every step. It's easy for us to want to skip steps. Oh, I know how to do that, you say. And so you'll breeze through something instead of paying attention. But when we're learning, and even when we're daily going about our business, when we rush, we're much more likely to make a mistake. Even if we've done the thing we're rushing 100,000 times, rushing, not being deliberate in our movements, can cost us. It can cost us monetarily. It can cost us in relationships. It can cost us in integrity. And so the first picture I've got here is the tortoise and the hare. Because the tortoise and the hare, Aesop's famous fable, made into plenty of cartoons and stories, is a lesson in making haste slowly. Or as we know the moral, right, slow and steady wins the race. The hare is proud. The hare is arrogant. The hare thinks that he can rush through things and take a nap, and the tortoise wins the race. Or depending on which version of the cartoon you've seen, he also has a very large family, which can appear at every part of the race while the tortoise is walking. I think that's Looney Tunes version. But the tortoise and the hare, among other images that we'll look at today, is a great example of a timeless teaching of how to make haste slowly, how to be deliberate and careful as we go from one thing to the next. The next image I want to look at is maybe a little less familiar, unless you've seen this before. This is a nice fancy graphic version of this. This coin is from the time of the Emperor Vespasian and also Titus, his son. So this is the end of the 1st century AD, and Vespasian, as well as Caesar Augustus, the Romans cared very much about making haste slowly. So much so that they took the dolphin and the anchor and they put it on their coins. So the dolphin is the festina. That's the making haste. Butterflies were also used for this. And the anchor is the slowly. Now, that makes sense, even if it's counterintuitive, right? Your dolphin is speeding through the water, and the anchor is making that a deliberate speeding through the water. It's not a darting to and fro, because the anchor is always pulling you down. It's probably not helpful to think about the anchor being stuck in the rocks, because then you're just fighting against something. But the anchor is meant to be that groundedness that is necessary really for life, and then certainly necessary as we plug along at school, as we are working on the variety of different things that we need to learn. So what do tortoises and hares and anchors and dolphins have to do with kindergarten or 7th grade or 9th grade or preschool? Right? Festina Lente means to not rush. It means to carefully work at every part of one's education and to cultivate the education to not be rushing from one thing to the next, fitting as many things as possible. This will tie into next week. Next week's principle is multum non multa, much, not many. Because it's very, very difficult, if you've got 100 things to do them all deliberately, carefully, and slowly. So Festina Lente is a principle that drives teachers and students and parents towards mastery. It may seem like drudgery and monotony, but there's a point to monotony. When you learn to tie your shoes, if you rush through tying your shoes, you'd have to do it again because they come untied. You have to tie your shoes multiple times in order for it to actually work, unless you just wear Velcro, as lots of little kids would prefer to do. But there's not always a shortcut. There's not always Velcro shoes. Sometimes everything has to be tied. Math facts have to be mastered. Phonics have to be mastered. Latin vocabulary, timelines, all of the building blocks that make up an education need to be there in order for you to move to the next step. And sometimes that means limiting the amount of things that we learn. Now, that may seem silly to you, since all of you know we have a lot of subjects here at school. But when we talk about adding new things, or about why we do one thing and not another, say Latin instead of a modern language, at least from 1st through 8th grade, part of that is because, well, all of our students can learn Festina Lente, and it's the same language they're learning at school. But the other part is that Latin provides a foundation that other languages don't. And that's not just because of the Norman invasion of Britain and all the Latin-based words that are in English, but it is such an important part of Western civilization that it, as a subject, assists us in making haste slowly, in building a deliberate, carefully practiced learning habit. It's very easy for us to want to skip around. It's also very easy for us to not want to review. And those things are part of making haste slowly. Constantly going over memory work, memorization, rules, procedures. We want to skip and go from one thing to the next. Yeah, I already got that. Let me move on. This is a temptation for teachers who really want to get their favorite part of the lesson in for the day. It's a temptation for students who really want to get to recess, or who really want to get to rest time, or who wish they had rest time because they're in 8th or 9th grade and they'd like to take a nap. But Festina Lente ends up being an underlying principle that helps undergird and support, provide a foundation for every part of the day, whether it be the subjects that we learn, the books that we choose to read and not to read, the conversations that we have, the way the schedule is lined out. Festina Lente, making haste slowly, is something that allows us to live and manage our lives in a deliberate fashion, and to teach children that life requires and benefits from a deliberate way of going about things. I'm indebted greatly to Christopher Perrin for a lot of these illustrations, but the carpenter's principle of measuring twice and cutting once, right? Why do something twice when you can do it right the first time? All of these come into the scope of Festina Lente, of making haste slowly. It's annoying to some of us, especially if things come quickly. If we think, oh, I can do that. I don't need to take my time. But it's a very important way to develop patience, a way to fight against instant gratification, which now more than ever, even though we've had a little bit of a slowdown due to COVID, but with single-day Amazon deliveries, it's very easy, and curbside for every grocery or thing you could possibly want. It's very easy to be caught up in continuously spinning the wheel, in living life from day to day to day, rejoicing that it's Friday, right? And then dreading the Monday to come, instead of deliberately plodding from day to day and enjoying and working through all of the challenges and joys, sorry to use that word twice, but joys that come from living from day to day. So our first principle, make haste slowly, Festina Lente, is one that we do well to remember. And to remember that there is a tension. Even though we've adopted as a faculty, you may see people rushing through things, teachers rushing from lesson to lesson, students rushing from one thing to another. You may even be more aware of your tendency to rush. But our hope is, with this in mind, making haste slowly, to correct a tendency to rush, a tendency to not desire mastery and put in the time and energy it takes to acquire such mastery. The 1,000-hour rule, or whatever it is, 10,000, right? To master something takes a long time. And most of us are not patient enough to do it. But what better way to prepare our children and our grandchildren and future generations to be patient than to embody and to teach them to make haste slowly? There's plenty of time. And as Christians, if Jesus comes now, there was no point in rushing anyway. So take the time that God gives you to deliberately, day by day, subject by subject, item by item, to make haste slowly, to Festina Lente, although that's not really good Latin because it's actually a command. But I guess you'd have to do festinare, Lente. But make haste slowly then is a great place to start, to go from one thing to the next. Make sure you have this, and then you move to that. To teach patience, to teach diligence, to teach joy in the little things and joy in accomplishing things, taking time to enjoy those things instead of what comes next. Any questions, reflections, or other questions that you may have had when you knew that we were going to get to do something like this that you'd like addressed? To keep in the time, but also to allow for time to digest. We've got around 10 minutes left to either take questions from the floor or ruminate some more on what it means to master something, to make haste slowly. Feel free to either chat to me or raise your hand physically, or raise your hand the Zoom way if you know how to do that. Any of those would be perfectly fine with me. Or if you just want to keep on listening, I can make haste slowly to something else. No? Yes. Tanya, Mrs. Damaris. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm using my computer audio, so I never know if it works or not. But, you know, there was a lot of challenges, obviously, around the last 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember at the beginning when everything stopped, it was almost like a relief, you know, because it was just like the lifestyle that we live, you know, here. And I mean, maybe everywhere, but
Mm-hmm.
it's so fast paced. And I think especially as a parent and a working parent, any kind of parent, it's just this rat race of like, get the children up in the morning and then climb the mountain of, you know, make your beds, get dressed, get your teeth brushed, get out the door, get breakfast, you know, race to the carpool line to get there on time, and then go to work and then pick them up and then go to the activities. I mean, it's just like, it's the lifestyle, a daily life of being a parent is just, it's really indescribable almost. And so when the whole shutdown happened, I almost just felt this sense of like, oh my God, I mean, I don't have to keep up with anyone. There's no activities. So I don't have to like, you know, it's not competing, but it's just, I feel like everyone's doing all these activities. So we should be doing all these activities and having them in, you know, something different every single day. I mean, it's just, it's a lot. So anyways, I think that was one gift of the quarantine time, was just that slowing down. And it actually, there was something really healthy I felt about it in the beginning. After 5 months, I was ready to.
Uh-huh. No, I totally agree. You've brought to mind, I'm probably going to put up a lot of books on these Fridays. This book, I know it's backwards, unless it's frontwards for you, but it's backwards for me. This is Anthony Esolen. He is an English professor, humanities professor, Roman Catholic, but a very good social commentator. It's called 10 Ways to Destroy the Imagination of Your Child. We studied it as a faculty a couple of years ago. Be forewarned, it's really satirical and tongue-in-cheek. Some of our faculty members were, by the time they were done, they're like, I can't take another sarcastic sentence. But it's a really excellent book. And you bring it to mind because of the Tormentarian section. That's an Esolen thing. We can see how wise the Tormentarians are if we compare their children's schedule with that of a typical boy from a few generations ago. Tormentarian Saturday, 8 a.m. gobble down breakfast, 8:15 be driven to soccer, 8:30 game, 11:30 be driven to lunch at fast food joint, 11:45 gobble down lunch, noon be driven home, quote unquote, 12:15 downtime, video games, television, 3 o'clock go to martial arts, 3:30 martial arts, 4:45 be driven home, quote unquote, 5:15 wait for dinner and complain, 5:45 gobble down dinner, 6 o'clock, pretend to be doing homework, go on internet instead, look at unusual pictures. 8 o'clock, do homework. 9:30, watch television with parents or movie. 10, go to bed. Chat with friends on internet. Don't write down a single complete sentence. 11:45, gobble down snack, midnight sleep. So that's tormentarian.
Amen.
Here's the other one. This is what it was forever ago for Stan Musial. 7 a.m., gobble down breakfast. 7:15, do chores. 8 o'clock, disappear with buddies. 7 p.m., show up for supper, gobble down supper. 7:15, listen to the radio. 7:45, go to grandma's house, gobble down snacks. 9 o'clock, do chores. 9:30, sit on the porch and eat another snack. 10 o'clock, go to sleep. The book is really great because it helps to work on recalibrating what we expect out of childhood and what we've been led to expect out of childhood. And to a certain extent, like you said, without the whole place shutting down, it's very difficult to reset, to say, no, I'm not going to do that. Like when there's a blackout, I guess it's 17 years ago, there was the big blackout in New York City and Long Island and the whole tri-state area. And it was really something else because everybody had to stop. You couldn't do anything. I mean, I guess you could call people because there were landlines, but you couldn't do anything at all. And there aren't enough opportunities. I mean, COVID kind of provided it, but there are few opportunities to get off the wheel, to stop spinning. And a classical education, a wholesome traditional worldview sort of demands to put your hand out and stop the wheel, get off the wheel and set your own pace. And the pleasant thing about that is that we all can support each other as we do it together. It's very difficult to do it one by one. People say, oh, well, aren't you going to come and do this? Right? You get sort of looked at as weird. I mean, you may even get looked at weird here. I know I'm weird. But at least together, we can say, thus and no further. This is how we raise our children. This is what we want our children to pay attention to. This is how we develop our family life and teach children what's good, true, and beautiful. So it really is nice, A, when we get that opportunity, like 5 months ago, and B, when we can choose to seize that opportunity and then live in it and then hand it down as something else for our kids to embrace. All right, I've got 2 minutes. If anybody wants to get another word in. Yes, thank you, Miss Berta, for 10 Ways to Destroy the Imagination typed out. Hold on, the chat's too big. Elizabeth, you wanted to talk? Yeah, let me get you. And that should work.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just, it's interesting when talking about this because when we were living in Germany, that slower pace is more noticeable there. And as Americans, having moved there, at first, we were like, let's go, like what's taking so, even fast food is not fast in Germany. And if you stop at a restaurant on a road trip, you're going to sit there for at least an hour, hour and a half. You have to build that in because the point of doing something like that is to sit and enjoy. They didn't have takeaway coffee until recently. You sit, you have your cup of coffee. There's a little cookie that comes with it. You talk with people, you read a book, it's just really built in. And the way that they deal with childhood, and they don't start Erste Klasse until 6-7 years old. And they go in Kita. There's no kindergarten, but they call it kindergarten, but you go and you play. There's no preschool. There's no kindergarten like we have it. You go and you play, you saw boards and hammer nails and light candles and learn how to cross the street and that kind of stuff. But they play outside like the majority of the day. And so it was funny because you learn to slow down while you're there. And then we had moved back, and our German friends came to visit last October, and they were like, sit down, Elizabeth, and have some coffee and tea with us. You know, stop cleaning up the kitchen. We'll help you let's sit and talk. And I could feel the anxiety and the like rush. It was such to compare with them. I could feel how like tightly wound I had gotten again, just because of the way the culture moves us. And we're pretty deliberate about not having tons of activities and stuff like that. But even just sitting with them really showed me how much I had gotten back into that rushing habit.
Yep. Great. I'll do this again next time, but this is the disappearance of childhood. It's a little related, not entirely related, but Neil Postman, Disappearance of Childhood. It has some very good points. I like Postman. He's got a lot of good things. He's been dead a while now, but Amusing Ourselves to Death about TV, still really good. Technopoly is really good, probably his best. And then Disappearance of Childhood is very thought-provoking. It's not as tongue-in-cheek as this one, the Esolen. Esolen also has another one about destroying your child's humanity, which is also really good. Well, that's all the time we have for today. This is really fun. I'm glad we're doing it. Next week, we'll do another one, and we'll do much, not many, multum non multa. And then we will have coffee with the headmaster the following Friday. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, for stopping by at our new Sifting Through the Rubble. Have a great rest of your Friday. Make haste slowly at something, and enjoy your weekend.